Hey guys, we're going to be working on some problems that are called consecutive integers, and these aren't necessarily out of your book, but they are problems that you'll see pop up from time to time, and they go along with algebra in terms of the content. So I want to go through a couple of these problems as an example for you. So here is some things. So a lot of times you'll see it start, it'll say like 3 consecutive integers. And what that means, the word consecutive, hopefully you know what it means, but just to be clear, would be like 3 or 4 and 5. Those are 3 consecutive integers. So integers that go in a row. You might also see something like this where it says 2 consecutive even numbers. Well, hopefully you know your even numbers. That would be something that's 12 and then 14. Or you might see the sum of the third and 2 times the first of 3 consecutive odd integers. And these kind of get messy on here. But again, that thing you want to find here are the consecutive odd integers. So we'd be looking at something like 7 and then 9, or every now and again you'll see like consecutive multiples of 3, which makes it difficult. But then you're looking at like 9 and 12, 15, or something like that. So that's the first thing you want to do on these problems, is identify what set of numbers it is that you're talking about. So let's go ahead and go through a couple of these examples. This first one says the sum of 2 consecutive integers is 39. Find the numbers. Now there's a few different ways to do this, but usually what I do is there's 2 consecutive integers. So if it's integers, I'm going to call them I. I know a lot of people will use X's on these, but I'll say I1 and then I2 for integer. That way, anytime I see that, I think, oh, okay, that's what I'm talking about. It says the sum of 2 consecutive integers. So if this first integer is some value that we don't know, we'll just call that I. Whatever that number is, to find the next integer, or the consecutive integer after that, I'm going to add 1 to whatever that value is. So integer 2 is going to be equal to whatever integer 1 was plus 1. And that's what makes it a consecutive integer. So these are what these 2 integer values are. And this whole thing that I did here, I encourage you to just write that on the side of your paper. It makes things a little bit easier to see in terms of the perspective. So from here it says the sum of 2 consecutive integers is 39. So the sum of this and this, because it's all addition, I don't really need parentheses, although you could put parentheses around this just to show that that's a different term. The sum of these two things is equal to 39. So from here I have I plus I is 2I plus 1 equals 39. And then I would subtract 1 from both sides, and I get 2I equals 38. Divide by 2. And this is where you're doing your pretty simple equation stuff. So divide by 2, and we get 19. So that means integer 1 is 19. And then to find integer 2, I add 1 to that, which is going to be 20. So this is not the final answer. The final answer is when it says find the numbers. What are the 2 numbers? It's 19 and 20, and you could very quickly check that. 19 plus 20 is 39. So that is the solution to that. So here's one for you to try. Go ahead and take a moment and do that. And hopefully when you're done, you found that the 2 integers are 41 and 42. All right, let's take a look at another example. So here it says the sum of 3 consecutive integers is, gasp, a negative number, negative 39. Find the numbers. Okay, so it's consecutive integers again. So I'm going to have integer 1, which is equal to just I. Then I have my second integer, which is equal to I plus 1. And then I have integer 3, which is going to be the integer before it plus another one. In other words, I plus 1, so that's this one, plus another one. But instead of writing it as plus 1, I'm going to go ahead and just combine those two things, and we'll say that it is plus 2. So I plus 2. So the sum of these 3 consecutive integers is negative 39. Find the numbers. So I'm going to take this one, this first integer, add it to the second integer. Whoops, make that a 1. Add it to the third integer, and those need to equal negative 39. So here I got some like terms to combine. I have I plus I plus I is 3i. Here I have 1 plus 2 is 3, and this whole thing equals negative 39. So here I would subtract 3. It's just a two-step equation at this point. Negative 42. Divide by 3. And I equals, I believe 16, but just let me double check. No, 42, not 16, 14. I equals negative 14. So that's the value of I, that's that first integer. So this one is negative 14. Now be careful when it's negative, because I'm adding a positive one. Remember, a consecutive integer, if I'm going up, moving left to right on the number line, the next integer on this is actually negative 13. And then the one after that is going to be negative 12. So be very, very careful on this. And then if you add these together to double check, it is negative 39. But this is a part that kind of confuses students. A lot of times you're just so used to counting up, you do negative 14, negative 15, negative 16, but that's incorrect. Those three values do not add together to be negative 39. It must be negative 14, negative 13, negative 12. So be very, very careful on problems like that. So here's one for you to try. Go ahead and take a moment and try to find that one. Oh, wait. This isn't a try. This is the even or odd stuff. The sum of 3 consecutive even integers is 84. Find the numbers. Okay, so it's 3 even integers. In this case, I'm going to switch from i's to e's. E for even. It just helps me remember what it is that I'm looking at. So I have even 1, I have even 2, and I have even 3. My first even I just call even. The second one is going to be whatever this number is, but think of the way numbers work. If I have even numbers, it's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and so on. To get from one even number to the next, I don't add 1, I add 2, plus 2, plus 2, plus 2, every single time. So to go to the next even number, I add 2 to that. And then down here, I'd add 2 to this, which makes that e plus 4. So it's a little bit different on these if I want to find consecutive even numbers. So I have e plus 2 plus e plus 4, because it's the sum of these three things, and that equals 84. So then I go through and I solve my equation, combine like terms, equals 84. I subtract 6 from both sides. That is 78 divided by 3. And e equals 26. So my first one is 26. The next is add 2 to that. And then the third is add 2 to that. And you could add these together very quick. Add these together very quickly to see if that works out. All right, so pause and take a moment. Try this one on your own. All right, and hopefully on this you found negative 43, negative 41, and then negative 39. Again, be careful with the odds when you start increasing those. Odds work the same way as evens, by the way. Think of the way this works. I have 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, and so on. Every time to go to the next odd number, which I would have used O on this, so I'd have O1 and O2, I go up by 2, I go up by 2, I go up by 2 every single time. So when you set this sets up very similarly to the even problems. All right, so this is the last thing we're going to look at, these challenge problems that make it kind of difficult. So read through the whole thing. It says the sum of twice the sum of the first number and 3 and 4 times the second number of two consecutive integers is 196. Find the numbers. Oh man, that is ugly. So first thing I do is figure out, well, how many different numbers am I talking about? Well, it's two consecutive integers. So I have integer 1 and I have integer 2. And it says that the sum of these two different things, the sum of twice the sum of the first number and 3. Okay, so the sum of twice the number, these are consecutive, so again, this is equal to I, and then this one is going to be equal to I plus 1. The sum of twice the first sum of twice of the sum of the first number and 3. So I have the first number plus 3, and I have twice of that value. And 4 times the second number, so plus 4 times the second number, which I don't know what the second number is, but I could call it I plus 1. That's a parenthesis right here, is 196. Okay, so here I wrote this out. This is twice the sum of the first number and 3, so there's the sum of the first number and 3 times 2, plus 4 times the second number, so that's 4 times the second number is I plus 1, is 196. So when we go through, and this is how our equation sets up, and we solve this. So I have 2I plus 6 plus 4I plus 4 equals 196. Combine my like terms, so I have 6I plus 10. Subtract 10 from both sides. 6I equals 186. Divide by 6. And we get I is equal to 31. Okay, so if I is 31, add 1 to that to find my next consecutive integer. So the consecutive integers here are 31 and 32. This, in terms of the math part, that's not going to be too difficult for you. The part that's going to be tricky for a lot of you is just this initial setup. So make sure that you're taking your time and reading this out well. That's it for today. So we're going to spend probably a day or two practicing just these kind of problems. So make sure that if you are lost on this, that you are seeking help while you're in class. I will see you then.